What's up, everybody? Welcome into the MMA Hangout. I'm joined by Danny Segura from MMA Junkie. Danny, I mean, 290. I don't have the correct words to say to explain what we witnessed at UFC 290. It was International Fight Week. We know it's the kind of Super Bowl, quote unquote, for the UFC, putting all of their chips in the middle of the table, no pun intended, to be like, this is the UFC at its grandest stage in Vegas. And they delivered. Rarely do we see a card that is so hyped and so perfectly matched deliver like this. From top to bottom on the main card, we saw banger after banger after banger after banger, and a historic fight for the Flyweight Championship. More on that to come. We saw Bo Nickal get a KO, TKO, whatever you want to call it, a very decisive win. We saw Dricus du Plessis dismantle Robert Whittaker in a way that nobody's seen. Nobody's ever seen that before. Robert's first loss to somebody not named Izzy in 6 years, 7 years, or whatever it's been, maybe longer. And we'll start here. The featherweight championship of the world, the unification of the featherweight belt, the GOAT right now, Alexandre Volkanovski against Yair Rodriguez. What do you think about? I saw a picture that had Yair Rodriguez, it had Islam, it had Max Holloway, and I'm trying to think of the other person. I'm gonna see if I can find it while you talk.
Probably Jose Aldo.
Was it Jose Aldo? I don't know who it was, but it was all of Volk's last four opponents, and what their face looked Ortega and what their face looked like after the fight. We never think of Volk as a guy who's landing these monster punches, has super KO power in his hands. But when you look at the damage done to Yair Rodriguez and the way that Volk won, what else is there to say about Volk right now?
Yeah, no, for sure. And let me pause right here and do a brief parenthesis, and I'll take back the flex that I did as you introduced me as the great Danny Segura, because I owe maybe not an apology, but I do think it's, you gotta own up to your picks, right?
Yep.
If I get them right, I puff my chest a little bit, and if I don't, I gotta lick my wounds and kind of accept, my defeats. I had some people from the Middleweight family, some of the fans reach out to me and be like, "Yo, Danny Segura, you suck." Just because my picks were all over the place, I did not nail them. But look, MMA is such a tough sport to predict, and if you're not that familiar with MMA and you're just kind of listening to the pod, and then you're like, "Okay, let me check this card out," what you saw was one of the greatest cards in UFC history, like literally like top 10. Tons of finishes, as you said, banger after banger. And on top of that, surprises. I'm still trying to process some of the results. Like Dricus du Plessis defeating Robert Whittaker, like what on earth? And there's just a million things. Like even just Bo Nickal, like NCAA legend, just a stud wrestler, one of the greatest wrestlers we've ever seen. Knockout in 38 seconds. And you just go down the line, just like surprise after surprise. So I do not suck, guys. It's just the nature of the sport,
hard,
all right?
Man.
And I think you got my back on this, right?
Yes, absolutely. Betting is hard, number one. Two, there's one thing I know for certain in gambling. There is no such thing as a lock. Anything can happen at any time, right? And we didn't even talk about Robbie Lawler, which we'll get to in a second. That was something from another planet too.
I'm still processing that whole thing. Yeah.
Like if you checked in on this card for the first time watching UFC and you think this is what UFC is, I'm sadly mistaken. This is not always what it looks like, but the drama is there. The pressure cooker of certain divisions is there. And I think that's one thing that me and you love to express to people that have never really paid attention to the sport, or they're like, "Oh, I don't like the violence," or it's just kind of fighting. It's not really for me. When you look at the storylines, when you look at the drama behind it, when you look at a lot of what these guys and girls have to go through to reach the top, it's incredible. It's inspiring, and it's stuff that you would write in a movie. Like we talked about on the 290 recap that we did for the postgame the other day about Brandon Moreno's story, how he gets cut from the UFC, how he has to fight his way back. He eventually makes it back to being a champion. Now the guy that usurps him as champion of the flyweight division has his own story that's almost as comparable to the story of Brandon Moreno.
Goosebumps right now. You're just talking about that. We'll talk about Pantoja in a minute.
Yes. There's so much to talk about.
That was one of like the darkest and just like heaviest like post-fight interviews inside an octagon, like the one that Pantoja did with Joe
Yes.
Rogan. Even in my Spanish language podcast, I like took like a minute to just be like, just kind of take it all in. Like that was just insane. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Okay, no. So we'll get to the flyweight championship. Let's go featherweight. Volk versus Yair Rodriguez. Is that what you expected in that fight? Did you expect Volk to do what he did? It almost looked like he took what he learned. And this is the cool thing about boxing. Is a cool thing about combat sports, MMA, where you fight the champ or you fight a champ from another division, and there's things that rub off where you're, oh, I didn't think about doing this way. I didn't think about taking him to the ground here or doing that. I'm going to add that to my playbook now. It almost looked like Volk took some of the stuff he saw from Islam, who is, again, one of the greatest wrestlers in his own right in his division, moved it over to featherweight and said, okay, you're going to stand and throw kicks. Yair was on fire with that first round, throwing stuff from all over the place. He's like, okay, perfect. Takedown, bomb, just ground and pound. Do you think that Volk saw that from that Islam fight and then put it into his arsenal?
I think that was part of it, but I really do think that the biggest thing, and he mentioned this at the post-fight press conference, and we knew this going into the fight without him even just acknowledging it. At that point, he was just verifying it. But Yair Rodriguez by far was the most dangerous guy that he had faced as champion, right? I'm not saying the best. I think technically there are guys that are better than Yair in the division. But as far as like who can present the most danger at all times, who can finish you at all times, that is Yair Rodriguez. If people don't believe me, go watch his knockout of Korean Zombie, which literally was at the buzzer as the bell rang. He hit him with a spinning back elbow, laid him flat on the canvas in one of the craziest fights in UFC history, and he was losing that fight. He literally won it by a split second. So Yair Rodriguez, as long as there's a pulse on that dude, he can knock your head off with a kick at any point in time, or an elbow, or whatever it is. And he's not a traditional fighter. He does a lot of spinning attacks, so it's really hard to prepare. So even if you're technically sound, even if you're vastly better than him, you can still get knocked out because there's just no one like him. So Volkanovski said this at the press conference. He's like, he can't beat me. Like, I'm better than him. I know that. But can he surprise me? Yes, like he can surprise anybody. But skill for skill, I'm better. And there's no doubt about that. So his whole thing was, how can I minimize the risk as much as I can? Because obviously, whenever you're fighting, the risk is always there. And that was wrestling. The more Yair isn't kicking, the less of a chance there is for you of getting knocked out. So that's basically what Volkanovski did. Can Volkanovski stand with Rodriguez? Of course. I mean, he ended up knocking him out on the feet, right? Or at least that's what like led to the finish. A right hand, I believe, that caught him as Yair came in with a kick. But he's just so smart. I think this just speaks volumes about how smart Volkanovski is. And something that I love that you said was, you know, they showed like all the past four opponents, their faces of Volkanovski's previous opponents. And they're all, you know, just beat up. They're all just massacred. And we don't think of him as a bruiser. We don't think of him as a mauler, but he is. And part of that is because he's so smart and so technical that you're just in awe of how good this fighter is. And you kind of forget about the savagery because there is also that component of him. So yeah, just a fantastic performance, an incredible game plan. I mean, if there is a way to fight Yair Rodriguez the best that you possibly can, that was seen on Saturday night at UFC 290.
And it speaks to the level of respect that the entire division needs to have for Rodriguez, because I want to say it was in the second round, Rodriguez caught Volk with an elbow that split him on his eyebrow right here on either the right or the left side. I don't remember which one it was, but it was, oh, okay, Volk's bleeding now. Like the champ is bleeding. And usually when that happens, the tide starts to turn a little bit because that fighter looks at it and said, okay, now you're bleeding. Now we're in a real fight because I can see that you're bleeding and it gives me a little bit more fuel. But the fact that Rodriguez came in and was not shy, he was not, oh, this is the champ. It was almost like the opposite of Cyril Gane when he walked into the octagon with John Jones and was like, I don't know if I could do this, right? All of a sudden, John gets him, Bob puts him down, puts him in the guillotine, it's over. It was almost like Rodriguez like, okay, perfect. I'm going to throw a couple kicks. I'm going to let you know my distance that I can hit you from back here, right? And it's almost disproportionate to his body. Rodriguez's legs, it's like his whole body is just legs.
It's all legs.
It's all legs. I'm looking at where his hips are, and they're like up here on Volk's like forehead. So he's throwing kicks everywhere. He threw a question mark kick that didn't land, but that was so clean. Even DC was like, holy shit, look at that question mark kick. I said it during the recap, and I still believe this is the case. At some point, Rodriguez is going to be featherweight champ, whether that's through Volkanovski, whether that's through Topuria, whether it's Volkanovski leaving the division. Something's going to happen because he's too special a fighter, too creative, too IQ-driven a fighter to not be champion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you guys know some of my coverage, within this beat, within this niche, I even go even deeper and get like the subculture within the subculture, which is, I cover a lot of the Hispanic scene, given that, Spanish is obviously my
excellently,
my
by the way.
language.
Give a quick little plug for the pod.
Sure. Yeah. Just check out Hablemos MMA if you guys want MMA content in Spanish. I do interviews, breakdowns, all kinds of things. It's on YouTube. So go look that up. But anyways, I love Yair. Yair is a great fighter, a phenomenal world-class elite fighter. There's no question about that. I do think he's going to challenge for a belt. And something that I was telling sort of the Hispanic and Mexican fan base, and even just in general, obviously he has a fan base beyond the Spanish-speaking audience. But don't worry about Yair. Like literally, don't worry about that guy. He's just 30 years old. He's just 30. I mean, arguably his best years are ahead of him, right? Yeah. 31, 32, 33. That's usually the very prime of a fighter. I mean, Volkanovski's 34, going on 35 here in September. So he's a bit older, and his prime is a little bit later, but still, I'm pretty sure I agree with you. I'm pretty confident that Rodriguez is going to find himself in a title fight again. I don't know if he'll be champion. We'll see about that, because there's some hammers in that division, but that he's going to beat up some fools, hand a knockout here and there, and then find himself challenging for a belt. Yeah, for sure.
Topuria is a problem. Like his boxing is huge. Is next level. And like, if you think of the next generation of fighters in that featherweight division, I think of those two, Rodriguez, Topuria, and then somebody's got to knock off Volk, right? It looks like if Volk doesn't go fight Islam again,
he doesn't have to,
right? And he was kind of alluding to stuff like that. He obviously has they said it after the card, he actually has to have an arm surgery. I don't know exactly what the issue was, if it was his shoulder, if his arm, or whatever it was.
Like something with his bicep, but it's very minor. They said it's basically just like a small surgery. There's even a chance that he could even return in October and fight Islam Makhachev then for the 155-pound title, go up once again.
If that's the case, I mean, I didn't know the severity of the injury, but I remember them saying like, yeah, he's got to have a surgery done, a procedure done. So that might, depending on what it is, may knock him out for that fight. Well, I think it's 294 in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
That would be a war. But those two guys in that featherweight division are just so fun to watch, because Rodriguez with the kicks, the creativity, always never being out of it, right? Like you mentioned it, and Volk mentioned it. He's never out of a fight, because there's always a chance when he's in the octagon that a kick could come from out of nowhere, a submission could come from out of nowhere, like we saw with the triangle with Josh Emmett. He's just a super exciting fighter. All right. Fight of the night. Fight of the year?
Yeah. Right now,
already you're just going to say
fight of the year, for sure. We'll see what's in store, right? But for now, the bar is set pretty damn high.
We're talking about the flyweight title between Brandon Moreno and Alexandre Pantoja, which was the only way that I can describe it is a war. There's no other way to properly give the flowers that fight deserves, with the storylines going in, with now the news coming out. We're recording this on Monday, with the news coming out that Brandon Moreno was fighting for 4.5 rounds, let's say, with a broken hand, still outstruck Pantoja, I think 167 to 161 in significant strikes.
Yeah.
With a guy who had a broken hand and all of Mexico on his back to that moment. Can you put that fight into historical perspective and what that means for those two fighters?
I think the best fight ever seen at 125 pounds, it involves Moreno, but not Pantoja. That was the first Davidson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno fight. But this fight comes close. I think this is a top 5, probably between, the 3 best fights we've ever seen in flyweight history. As you mentioned, it was just a war, a very dramatic war, ups and downs for both. There was times where you think like, oh, the momentum's shift, and there's a point in a fight where the momentum shifts enough that there's no coming back from it. And I felt like we hit that multiple times with both fighters, where you're like, okay, Moreno's in his groove, like he's got this. And then all of a sudden, a minute later, Pantoja's got his back, and you're like, okay, well, this is it for Moreno. But then, Moreno would answer back. So it was just a crazy ass fight. It was ridiculous. And I just want to highlight Moreno here because, we'll talk about Pantoja, obviously the winner, the champion, but Moreno's just such a great product. Like, if you just look at him, if you just see him at kind of as what can he offer for the UFC, right? Dude, every single fight that he's in, either he's going to knock you out or submit you like in a beautiful fashion, and it's going to be a war in the process, or it's going to go to decision and it's still going to be a war. Like, name me in this current version of Moreno, right? Like the latest after he came back from being cut from the UFC. Name me a boring fight. They've all been bangers. They've all been great. Like, if you buy a pay-per-view with Brandon Moreno in it, you're in for, you're getting your money's worth.
All the Figueiredo fights have been great. Like,
all of them. Yeah. And even
that's why they
the
continue to do
one, great. Yeah, all of them have been awesome.
The thing I think about with Moreno too is the one combination that stuck out to me while watching, and this is with a broken hand. I don't remember if it was his left. Did they mention if it was left or right hand that he broke?
It was his right hand. Yeah.
Okay. He threw a combination with his left hand, so the non-broken hand. He threw a combination that went liver shot into a left hook in the same motion. That kind of stunned Pantoja and like just kind of fucked him up for a second. But that like double shot combo where he hit him liver and then left hook to the jaw was incredible. I was looking at the like how do you even have the hand speed to hit somebody twice that quickly while rotating, while doing all that stuff, and then not knowing he's got a broken hand with the other hand? Like,
yeah,
that there was such an elite level technically of their fight that it just spoils. Again, if you're watching this for the first time and this is what all fights are, this is the highest level. This is Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning. They got
that versus shelf. They got that good stuff,
Yes,
the high's never gonna be the same, brother.
Exactly. You're gonna be chasing this high for a long time.
They're gonna be watching like VHS, DVD tapes. Be like,
how do we get this? Like, no,
yeah,
this is
it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. That was just out of this world. I'll tell you this. It was a fantastic fight, by far front runner for fight of the year.
Yeah.
But to be a little bit more positive, there's always that one fight, right? Remember that Ioane and Jacek Zhang Wei Li fight in 2020. Sorry. There's always that one fight. Once a year, we get one of these. Once a year. And I think this one was it.
Yeah.
But yeah, MMA is awesome.
Me and my wife text about MMA almost every day. So
that's a couple goals right there.
Oh my God, dude. Like, I texted her today. I was like, I love how much you love this, because now all the MMA media is getting out all the stories and all the stuff that agents want to talk about or that the UFC is trying to put in. So we hear about Brandon Moreno's broken hand. We hear about Pantoja, which we'll get to in a second. Like, all these different things start coming out into the news cycle. So she sent me something about Pantoja, the Pantoja thing. And then I'll send her, Moreno had a broken hand. And she's like, what? I can't believe it. Like, this and that. So that's such a cool thing. But with that, you start looking at certain things and certain fights in a way that almost seeing it through somebody who's never seen it before and like experiencing it again kind of for the first time. So she was locked in. I was obviously doing the show, the MMA Hangout, and she was on the couch watching the fights and stuff. And she's like nervously texting me in the middle of the fights, like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like, look at that liver shot. Look at this. Look at that. She kept mentioning to me that there was a moment where I'm trying to think of the round it was. And I want to say it was maybe second or third round where Pantoja hit Moreno and it looked over. Moreno kind of stumbled. It was like, oh my God, I think this is
first
the moment.
round. Yeah.
First round.
The only knockdown of the fight was the first from Pantoja.
Okay. Yeah. So it's when you watch all those rounds.
Yeah. They all blend in.
But it was like, oh my God, wait a second. Is this about to happen? And Moreno's so durable too.
Mm-hmm.
The guy takes punches, takes kicks, he fights on the ground. Like, he was trying to get him in a rear naked choke. He's fighting him off. It was just such an excellent fight. And it's really cool to see somebody with two fighters with such extraordinary storylines. And I want to get to the second one because we talked about the first one, Brandon Moreno, getting to where he got to, UFC champion for the flyweight division after being cut by the promotion, after all the stuff that he's had to go through. Now moving to the new king of the flyweight division, Pantoja, who fights here out of Florida, Coconut Creek, American Top Team. A local South Florida guy, if we can say. He talks about how he moved his entire family over to Coconut Creek into South Florida. Has 17 kids. I didn't realize how many kids he had. Like,
he's got 17. That's what he said.
No, he has like 4 or 5 that ran out into the octagon. Dude, it was like, oh my god, I can't believe there's this many kids. But to see the release that he had, I think he fell on the floor too. Like he fell on the canvas and was just emotional. Give the people like a little bit of a breakdown of what he said and why it's so important.
Yeah. So not to get into like, because we can go down this rabbit hole like pretty deep, but like not to get into like the whole thing with fighter pay, but for people watching this, they might see fighters that, oh, they're on TV, they're verified on social media, they must make millions of dollars, right? Like you just assume like people that are on camera, you know, are just balling out, as you do in many sports, right? Like any like mediocre, and you definitely can speak more to this than me because I don't watch a ton of other sports besides MMA, boxing, and football or soccer, right? What you would call here in the US. But if you watch any NBA player or American football, like NFL or NHL, like those guys, even like the not well-known guys, are making a pretty decent buck, right?
I think the average NBA salary is $12 million.
Okay.
The average NBA salary. So you're talking about guys that make 50
in the UFC.
Yeah, you're talking about guys that make $50 million a year to guys that make, you know, $3 million a year, but that average is about 12.
Right. Okay. So yeah, Pantoja, like especially at 125, where it's a division that it's a little bit less marketable because, you know, these guys are smaller and there's that whole thing where, you know, maybe the audience sees it like less important, and obviously heavyweight is always seen as the biggest thing because, you know, physically it is. But you know, these guys are not making a ton of money. And you know, again, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole for this specific podcast on that. So like when these guys are fighting, it's not just more like sporting for glory, for fame, for legacy. Like a lot of them are fighting to provide to their families. A lot of them don't have that much money. Like this is it. This is what they do to make a living. And becoming a champion, being a star, being somebody that people just gravitate naturally towards you, and you become a pay-per-view draw, whether you have a belt or not, you're going to sell. That usually means a good paycheck. But sometimes a lot of fighters don't have that. And what they can only rely on is becoming the very best and being the champion. Because once you have the belt, even if you have no charisma or whatever you want to call it, you got no fan base, like you're still going to get championship money, which is obviously a substantial amount. So in this case, it's on that end life-changing for Alexandre Pantoja, somebody that's invested so much, you know, literally changing countries, moving from Brazil to South Florida, which you can make an argument is probably closer to Latin America so, in the US. So, but anyway, still, just like his story is incredible. And there was this moment where, you know, Joe Rogan gives him the mic, and obviously it's Vegas, Yair Rodriguez and Brandon Moreno, Mexican champions, fighting on the card. There was tons of Mexicans. I talked to a few journalists that went and covered the
you
event
could hear it too.
Yeah, and they were like, dude, I've never seen so many like Mexican and Mexican Americans like at a UFC event. Like this was something. So obviously, naturally, he was getting booed because obviously their guy lost, and he's crying, like he's got tears on his eyes, and he goes, guys, if you guys knew my story, you wouldn't be booing me. And then they ask him about fight stuff. Okay, you know, technical stuff. What's next? Blah, blah, blah. And then before they cut him off, he's like, yo, let me say one thing. And he looks, he's crying, and he's looking at the camera dead on. And he goes, my mom raised me as a single mother, me and all my siblings. Dad, are you proud of me now? Are you proud of me now? And I don't know if he's ever even met his dad, but like clearly that's been weighing on him for years. So we're literally probably one of the happiest moments of his life, realizing a dream that is becoming a UFC champion. And his first thing is kind of sticking the middle finger and kind of being like, look at me. Like, you know, you left me for dead, and I'm out here. Like, I'm world champion. Look at me now. And that to me was just heavy. I was like, that dude just released some demons in that sentence. So
it shows it. there's so many people that deal with a loss of a father, whether it be naturally by them passing away or by choice of the father, or whatever the situation is. There's so many people that connect with that story that their dad wasn't there for them. Their dad didn't believe in them, didn't care, didn't love, didn't whatever. You can fill in the adjective. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, not only in that building, but a lot of people watching on TV that connected with that in a way that maybe they hadn't heard of Pantoja, right? Maybe if you're a hardcore MMA fan, you know who he is. He's obviously an excellent fighter, whatever. But if you're a casual, if you're somebody who's just getting into the sport, who maybe likes Moreno, and you're like, oh, wait, this guy's pretty good, whatever. He connected with so many people at that moment.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine the number of people that are going through the same thing that he's going through, trying to live their life without a father, without an example of how to do certain things in this world that a father would provide. And all of a sudden you got there yourself. You did it because of your mom or because of your dad, vice versa, if there's another situation. But man, that bought him so much with the fan base. Yeah. Because when you connect at that level of heart of, man, I went through that, of like, my dad wasn't around and I made it, maybe not in sports, but I made it in business, or now I'm a father and I'm there for my kid. You know, like that to me was just so impactful, because like I remember hearing my wife cheer from the couch through the door because of the emotion that brought up. So when you said it, and when he said it, when you said it gave you goosebumps, it was such a moment. I saw it back a couple times after, just to get that the gravity of the situation, because man, it's tough.
Yeah. The UFC always uploads their post-fight interviews. So even if you didn't catch the pay-per-view, go look up on YouTube, like Alexandre Pantoja UFC 290 post-fight interview. It'll be up there. And like, you can see it. And like, man, that moment was so emotional. Even if you're Mexican, even if you're a family member or a friend or a personal friend of Yair Rodriguez, or in this case, Brandon Moreno, who's the person who lost against him, part of you does have to feel happy for Pantoja, because this is a guy that's just worked his ass off to get to where he is, had some setbacks because he had some losses in the UFC, got a winning streak together, got a championship bout, went through hell because Brandon gave him a beating. And he just realized his dream. And the first thing was shouting at his wife, shouting at his kids that were cage side. And part of you, if you're human, like, you just have to feel good for the guy, even if you do have some investment as a fan or whatever else with Brandon Moreno. Like, you can't hate on Pantoja. Like, that story is just remarkable.
And then it goes even further. If you want to peel back the onion a little bit further, you talk about fighter pay. You talk about how guys and girls that are lower tier in the promotion, how they're not making that life-changing money. Yeah. He said on Ariel Helwani's show that he was 2 years ago, until the Brandon Roval fight, where he got the 50K, he was driving Uber Eats. Can you imagine? You're going to go pick up, and imagine us living in South Florida. All of a sudden, you go to get your McDonald's Uber Eats, and it's Pantoja. You're like, oh, dude, what are you doing?
And at that time, literally one of the best flyweights on the planet, like top 10.
Yes, like taking people their food, and like people giving them shitty tips. Like,
and that story is so common too, like across the UFC and MMA, like, and just even boxing, like boxing a bit less. They seem to have higher purses, but that's just at the very, very top. But the people who have yet to make it, man, trust me when I say this, they eat shit. Like they if you ever seen Rocky, like, that's it. you know, Rocky wasn't based on nothing. Like, these people struggle, man. It's struggle city for these people to get to the top.
They fight in more ways than one, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's move down to middleweight. I think the most surprising. Could you say that was the most surprising fight of the card?
100%, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. And we're talking about Dricus du Plessis versus Robert Whittaker, middleweight bout. Basically, the middleweight contender. Next, the winner of this fight would go on to fight Israel Adesanya for the middleweight belt. Super active champion, by the way, which I love. I know that that's not really something that happens all the time. Usually get a champion fighting twice a year, maybe. Izzy seems determined to be fighting 3 or 4 times a year, which is really cool. But this was built up as a very good fight, but something that
Yeah, I think you're being generous there.
Yes.
Let's call it how it is. Nobody gave a shot to Duplessis.
Yes.
Everybody and their mothers was saying Robert Whittaker's obviously going to win. The only chance that he was given was a puncher's chance. Like, okay, if he catches him, they were literally saying like Whittaker has to be in his worst day and entered sick, injured, and Duplessis on his best day.
Right.
And even then, that won't even guarantee him a win. And everyone, including myself, look, I'll puff my chest when I get my wins. Trust me, I'll be back for those. But when I don't, I have no problem admitting them. Dude, a lot of people were shitting on the UFC matchmaking because Adesanya has cleaned out the division. He's fought everyone. At this point, everyone's a rematch rate trilogy. Duplessis is finally somebody that entered the top 5, has a win streak going, a fresh matchup. Just throw him in there to get a fresh look. We don't want to see Whittaker fight him a third time after he's already, 0-2 against the champion. So a lot of people were just saying like UFC kind of F you for killing a contender, and we're back to rematches and trilogies, fights that we've already seen and paid for. But that was clearly not the case, and Duplessis shut everyone up. Not only did he beat Robert Whittaker, but it was just the way he did it too, because it wasn't like he got his ass kicked the entire fight, pulled off the upset. No, he won on the scorecards the first round, beat him on points. And then the second, he went out there and finished him. It was as clean as and clear as it gets. Shut everyone up, including myself. Clearly the number 1 contender, no debate.
What I was trying to mention in this fight being good, right? Not categorizing it super high, was like there was intrigue, especially between Duplessis and Israel Adesanya, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was almost more of the buildup to the fight than it was between Whittaker and Duplessis, because what's the bad blood there, right? It's just, hey, you're the next guy I'm going to fight. And just the casual, I don't like you, we're going to try to sell this pay-per-view. But knowing the backstory of, okay, Duplessis is like, I'm the real African champion, blah, 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 all the stuff that he says, being of South African descent, living in South Africa, him having choice words for Israel Adesanya. When that fight was put together, I was like, okay, Whittaker hasn't lost to somebody not named Israel Adesanya since when?
The last decade.
The last, okay, so 20, okay. You're talking about a guy who is a day in and day out great fighter when he's not fighting against the champion.
Pound for pound best. He's one of the top 10 best fighters pound for pound.
Easily. And when Duplessis came up, I was like, okay, I saw them walking out. Man, I didn't realize how big Duplessis got post weigh-in. That dude filled out.
Big boy. Yeah.
Like, I wanted, like, they obviously have to get down to 85 to make it even, but I wonder how much weight he gained on the way back. Do you think he was 200? He looked 200.
Yeah, I think so.
He looked 200.
Yeah,
and like,
he's probably bigger than 200, to be honest.
He might have been 205, 210. Like he gained mass, because when I saw him come out, I was like, oh my God, wait a second. Like Robert Whittaker looked big, but he kind of looks the same. Right? Like he doesn't have this huge gain. His float is very like
keep in mind Whittaker used to fight at 170.
Right.
At one point in his career. So yeah, he's not a small middleweight, but not a big one either.
Not Duplessis, who could probably fight light heavy if he wanted to.
And still be fine. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So there was one jab that is the one that stunned Robert Whittaker, where Duplessis threw a left-hand jab just straight down the pipe, and it flattened Whittaker's face to a point where it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And then at that point, he was stunned. He was looking up, trying to regain his strength. And then that was it. Like it was over. So what's more intriguing to you? I'll put these two things on the table and you can pick. The fight between Whittaker and Duplessis, or the post-fight where Izzy gets brought into the octagon? What's a juicier story for you?
You know, this is probably this goes against probably the common train of thought here, because obviously, like, the most heated thing was, yes, Israel Adesanya and Dricus Duplessis face to face. That was something, and if you want, we can get into that. But that's kind of a very weird territory that I don't honestly know if I feel very comfortable talking about it. But sporting wise, again, like, dude, what Dricus Duplessis did was ridiculous. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to ever do a good job at conveying this to whoever's listening or viewing this, if they're just like a casual, doesn't follow the sport that closely, what he did was ridiculous. Like defeating Whittaker the way that he did under the circumstances that he came in under is just completely insane. Like when I'm telling you nobody saw this coming, nobody did. Nobody did. This was just such a huge surprise. And this is when like you don't know if the UFC sometimes knows something that we don't, or they're just getting lucky as shit, because they literally, the whole perception around this fight was the UFC shot themselves on the foot. They had a fresh contender from a sellable fight because there's bad blood between Du Plessis and Adesanya, and now they put him in against a fighter that 99% of the time is going to beat him. So like they just kind of shot themselves on the foot. But now Du Plessis pulls off the upset, wins, and the fight against Adesanya is even bigger than if they would have skipped the Robert Whittaker step, because now, one, he's more deserving because he beat Robert Whittaker, but two, the way that he did it just kind of makes it in everyone's eyes, the fight between Adesanya and Du Plessis, far more even than it was a fight ago. I mean, after you beat Robert Whittaker, hell yeah, like I'm not gonna count out.
Not even beat him, like
you finished him, you knocked him out. Yeah.
Yes.
So that fight just makes it far more compelling. So now there's bad blood, but because of this fight against Whittaker, it's not just bad blood and we're gonna get a heated build up and then the fight's gonna be a wash. No. Now there's bad blood and there's a bit of doubt. Like, wait, can Du Plessis actually pull this off? Like, maybe. Like, he just knocked out Whittaker. Like, we didn't even think that was possible. So this fight's going to be, I guess, amazing. I'm hesitant to use that word because there's some other things in play that make it kind of weird, right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
I'll dive into the other portion. So
I'll let you take that one.
they bring Israel Adesanya into the cage, and I wonder if that was mandated from the UFC, hey, come over here, or if it was Izzy going to Dana, hey, get me in there, I need to talk to him.
Mm-hmm. The latter. That was on the fly because you see Dana, and Dana's like, because you don't know if these guys are going to scrap, and you're
exactly. You don't know if a punch is coming
Dana's
out of nowhere.
Like, nah. And Izzy was telling him, I'm cool. So he's kind of.
There was multiple times where the security were trying to like separate them. He's like, I'm good. Yeah. It happened too. I was at 288 in Jersey when it was Cejudo versus Aljo, and they brought Sugar Sean up. Yeah. So it almost looked kind of very reminiscent of that, where, okay, is the UFC going to start if the guys in the same division together, girls in the same division together, and the champ is there, or somebody who's contending to be the champ, are they just going to automatically bring them into the ring now or the octagon and try to stir something up? Marab grabbed Sean's jacket, was on the side of the octagon, like putting over his head.
Didn't even notice until the photos
exactly. Sean was too busy like talking shit to Aljo. That's another interesting division kind of crossover too, with what Aljo's going to do at bantamweight if he's going to move up. That's a whole other discussion. Anyways, Izzy gets into Du Plessis' face, drops the N-word a couple times. Almost felt like he was goading him
like 15 times. But
Joe was like, "Oh shit, what do I do?"
Yeah.
It almost felt like he was trying to goad him into like saying something, right? I don't know if it would along those lines, but trying to say something that would fire back or clap back at him. But the whole thing was interesting because I wanted to see how far Izzy was going to go. How much will he sell? He's a showman, right? That's his shtick. How far was he going to be able to sell this fight into the future? And it seems like he chose to do a certain thing and say certain words that get things charged up in a certain way. Yeah. And I'm being very vague because I don't want to accuse the promotion. I don't want to accuse fighters of trying to sell fights based on the race card of black versus white. That's not what I'm here to say. I'm just saying it's interesting choice of words. Izzy's a smart guy. He's a very thoughtful guy. And he kept saying, I manifested this. And maybe he did, but it's going to be a banger nonetheless because I think Du Plessis is ready for him. And Izzy, after 2 fights with Pereira, is looking for something new and already the king of the middleweights. Him and Anderson Silva. Are we getting to a point now where he's another title defense over? Is he going to take that mantle from Silva for 85?
I don't think so. Silva still. How much that conversations warranted at 145? Like Volk is. Like if you tell me Volk is bigger than Aldo, I have very little argument against it. I still have Aldo as number 1, but there's a
That's close.
conversation to be had. Like
Right.
Volk is right there, but in the terms of Izzy, dude, what Anderson Silva did was special. Like he went up twice to 205, got wins there, defended the belt. I think it was a total of 10 times. Adesanya only has like 5, and Adesanya lost the belt and then regained it. In the case of Adesanya, Silva, he was always champion until he was phased out. So I think the Silva run is special. Is going to be hard to top. But I feel pretty comfortable in saying Adesanya is the second best ever at 185. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't think it was like showmanship or trying to build up a fight. The whole thing with Du Plessis, like it seemed deeply
genuine,
deeply personal.
Yeah.
For Adesanya. Adesanya could give 2 shits if this fight sells 1 million or 100,000 pay-per-views. Like he's gonna say what he's gonna say because it is personal. That's how I kind of took it. And to give some context, and I don't want to weigh in a ton of this on my own opinion because I mean I'm Hispanic, I'm not black, so I'm not here to say who is a real African and who isn't, because that's kind of like the whole thing in play here. But just to give some context to the people was Adesanya was born in Nigeria. His parents are Nigerian. He is a black man, now lives in New Zealand. And then you have Dricus Du Plessis, who lives in South Africa. He's a white man, but born in South Africa, he's a South African, rises to prominence. And then throughout that process, he's saying, I'm the real African champion because I live in Africa. I'm going to bring back the belt in Africa. I live and train in Africa. And Adesanya, who again lives in New Zealand, but is very much African. He was born in Nigeria, has an issue with that. And I can obviously understand why that has a lot of people have accused Du Plessis in having some sort of colonizer energy to his comments, right? I do get the whole thing like, hey, I train out of Africa. I do get that. What I don't agree, and he never said Izzy is an African. He just said like, I am like the best representation, basically. Right. But the whole thing is kind of weird because Africa is like such a diverse. I mean, it's a huge continent. It's the biggest. Like it's like saying, it's like saying like there's black. I'm Colombian, right? There's black Colombians. Right. There is white Colombians, right? Like that doesn't mean you're not Colombian. Like, I don't know. It's like a very complex situation, I guess. I don't know. But certainly it enters a territory where we're kind of, have to be very careful with what we say and whatnot, because obviously it is a very delicate subject. We're talking about race and whatnot, identity. So yeah, I don't know, man. This whole thing's kind of, I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it.
It's tough because you don't get to choose where you're born. Right. You just end up there because, hey, I'm born in Miami. I'm born in South Africa. I'm born in Colombia. Wherever I'm born, that's just where I popped out from. So it's tough. And the dynamics in play are going to be great inside the octagon. And I think the UFC is a very smart promotion in certain respects. And I think they're going to hopefully do the right thing when it comes to the promotion of this fight and what it means kind of in the bigger terms of things. I don't really know what's going to happen when it's scheduled for. All those different things. Obviously, they're going to start kind of putting that together now. But I think in Octagon, I think it's going to be a war. I think it's going to be a banger. It's going to be yet another test to prove Izzy's reign as a legitimate one, as that secondary guy in the division.
Yeah, but just heads up, UFC 293 is in Australia. Right. And as I mentioned, Israel Adesanya trains out of New Zealand. And that whole Oceania region, Australia and New Zealand, is very big for the pay-per-view business for the UFC. So they usually try to either have Robert Whittaker, Volkanovski, or Adesanya fight in New Zealand or Australia. Those are their guys to sell out arenas. So right now, it is expected that for Adesanya to defend his title at UFC 293, which goes down September 9th. So it all comes down is whether Dricus Du Plessis is going to be able to be fit, not only health-wise, but be able to go through a whole camp by then. That's going to be determined, I think, in the next week or so, because the fight date is so close that if they are going to make an announcement, it's going to be soon. So just heads up, we could hear of a potential fight between them two September 9th. UFC 293 in Australia.
That would be huge. And especially the quick turnaround. I don't think Du Plessis took a ton of damage either. Like relative to other fights. Like
right, but you never know broken. Like you
of
never
course,
know.
of course,
We'll see. Yeah, but I agree. Yeah, for sure.
you just never know. But getting to the next fight, we're going down the card here, UFC 290. Getting down to the lightweight fight between Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner, in a fight where I thought to that point in the night that was fight of the night because they were just kicking each other's ass.
Yeah,
it was an excellent fight. Hooker has such a tremendous chin on him. There was, I think, I kind of have big snapshots of all the different fights, and I just remember that head kick from Jalen Turner landing clean on the jaw and neck of Dan Hooker, and he was unfazed. Is he? I don't want to put him in the level of, oh, he's got an elite chin, but his chin is. I'm trying to think of better right now.
Well, the thing about Hooker is that, yeah, at his very best, like we've seen even the fight against Poirier, which was one of the best fights ever, like a few years ago, the amount of damage that guy took, and we know Poirier can crack.
Yes.
It was unreal. And he was still standing. We see what happened with Jalen Turner. Unreal that he took like the amount of shots. He got his ass kicked for the first 8 minutes of the fight, and then he was able to rally back and win.
Split his forehead with an elbow.
Yeah, I mean,
he was
and
bleeding.
His
hair was red.
Wrist broken too. Like Moreno, he had his wrist broken and was fighting with a broken wrist, which is ridiculous. So yeah, there's this side of Dan Hooker where you go, this man's indestructible. But then there's that quick first round knockout loss to Michael Chandler, that quick first round knockout loss to Arnold Allen. So whenever he steps into the cage, and he also got submitted in the first by Islam, didn't get knocked out, but still finished. You kind of don't know what version you're going to get, right? He's very, I don't want to say inconsistent, but he's just given us so many looks where you go, oh, this might be the end of his career. He's not looking good. And then the next fight you go, damn, this guy should be in title contention. He's so good.
Right. I was really impressed that he took all those shots and then delivered just a barrage of punches that sent Jalen Turner to like another galaxy.
Yeah.
He was at a point like he was looking up. I said it on the show when we were doing the watch party. When it looks like your fighter is standing on the edge of a cliff and he's trying to like not fall off the cliff, you're in a bad spot. And there was a couple of those throughout the night. But there was one where Jalen Turner was kind of trying not to fall off the cliff and Hooker was just beating on him. And I was just surprised to see, like you said, not that the inconsistency, but the fact that it's tough to go out and be a badass every single fight. It's like in golf, you have to be an elite golfer, every single shot has to be perfect. You shoot a bad shot, oh shit, all right, let me go in the woods, let me try to hit another good shot. But it's like the consistency that you build of, okay, this is a good fight, then this is a good fight, then this is a good fight, then this is a good fight. That is so hard, and it's almost reserved for the guys that and girls that end up being champion for so long, that those are the ones that put those consistent great battles out there. But for Hooker, it's like the glimpse of, damn, he has it. He's got the unknockout, gene of he's just going to take shots and he's going to continue to move forward. And then, like you said, submission is different, but the KOs, it leaves you a little bit wanting more. And Jalen Turner, I think he's super talented. I think he's got a ton of skill. I think he's got great size and length, but another guy that you can't do that. You can't be on the precipice of knocking a guy out and then get finished yourself.
Big lesson right there for Turner, because he should have won this fight. And that kind of seems like a shot at Hooker saying like, oh, it wasn't really what you did. It was kind of like what Turner didn't do.
Right.
But yeah, man, he really took him to the brink, and yet he wasn't able to finish, and he kind of gassed himself out. And then just got his ass kicked for like the last couple minutes. But credit to Turner, like he hung in there. As you mentioned, that's a great analogy. Like there were so many times where he was about to fall off that ledge, but he would reel himself back just enough, and he did that like 4 or 5 times. And like, we're not talking about just keeping your balance. We're talking about taking like massive shots from a trained fighter. Like for you to like,
killer.
For you to like, be able to rescue yourself from getting finished multiple times. Like you really want it, and 2, you got to be good. So I agree with you. Turner, despite the loss, I do think he's like one of the better lightweights. And I do think there are better days ahead of his career. I think he's only 28. Give him a couple more years, have him figure out a couple things. And I think he's going to be, in the top 10 for sure, getting close to like the top 5 of the division, I think.
He got saved by the bell too on one of them where Hooker had the rear naked choke and was just cranking him. And it looked like, I think it was either Joe or DC was like, he was looking at the clock and was like, oh my God, I can't believe there's 1 second left. Because if there was 5 seconds longer in that round, he would have gone to sleep. It was over.
I think
and he got saved by the bell. And like, that's when that moment, he kind of stumbled to the corner. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm still in this fight. So that was, again, top to bottom, man. There was just perfect matchmaking. The perfect scenario in these fights played out one after another. And we'll get to the last fight of the main card. Another middleweight bout between Bo Nickal and Val Woodburn, who a guy that the UFC signed, what was it, a week before the fight? Trayshawn Gore was
not
out.
even like 3 days.
3 days before.
It was on Wednesday.
Yeah, like, hey, you're fighting Bo Nickal, get in there. And he's like, oh shit, okay, let's do it. And it goes to show you, again, he's a blue chip prospect, elite wrestler, elite ground game for him. I think he needed to prove himself on his feet. I think there's a sentiment where he doesn't really let those hands fly as other guys do. He wants to kind of take you to the ground and fight that way. But I was very surprised to see him absolutely flatten Val Woodburn with 3 punches. I did not see that coming. It was 38 seconds.
Yeah. Dude, it's scary. It's scary because this is a guy that is a stud wrestler, right? Like he's a 4-time All-American, 3-time NCAA
legend wrestler.
Champion. He was given the Dan Hodge Trophy in 2019 for literally the most outstanding wrestler in the country. This is a guy that historically, like in collegiate wrestling, like this guy he's him, right?
Yeah,
like that's the guy, and he's out here knocking fools out and like with pretty clean technique. 5 fights into his like professional career, good boxing skills, good power, because power is not something you can teach. Either you have it or you don't. By far, make no mistake about it, there's no denying this. There's no argument. You can come at me on Twitter, whatever you want, at Danny Segura while you're at it. There is no better prospect in MMA right now than Bo Nickal.
Yeah.
No better prospect. And by a country mile. He is the guy that everyone should look at as a future champion. I mean, I know I took some L's in this card, but trust me, You're
sure of this one.
I am certain that Bo Nickal, when it's all said and done, one of his accolades out of all the many that he has already is going to be UFC champion.
It was surprising to see. It was surprising to see because a lot of his wins, and I don't have them off the top of my head, but I remember him submitting somebody. He's fought a lot of guys that, you get fed.
Jamie Pickett, like the opposition hasn't been good, right? Let's be honest. It hasn't been good, but that's the type of opposition.
But you're doing what you need to do.
Fighting at that stage.
Right, exactly. You're doing what you need to do with the guys that you're given. Because not like you pick your guy. I want to fight Izzy. Okay, no, it doesn't work that way. You're gonna get Jamie Pickett. Let's see if you can finish Jamie Pickett.
Yep.
Boom. I think he put him in a rear naked choke in like a minute? It was quick.
3 minutes. 3 minutes in the first round. Yeah.
3 minutes of the first round. Put him in a rear naked choke. It was over. There might have been a groin shot there, if I remember correctly, that was uncalled. That's another story for another day. But like you said, blue chip prospect and a guy that needed to prove that his hands had power, that he could fight standing up. Because what the UFC doesn't want, it feels like, is to have another guy that can contend for a title that's Colby Covington without the persona. They don't want another wrestler that's going to go in there and just dominate and wrestle. Like, it almost feels like that era of the UFC, they kind of want to distance themselves from the wrestler type that's just going to take you down and pin you for 5 minutes around. It doesn't work that way anymore. Yeah,
no, I mean, ideally, they want knockouts, right? Knockouts is what sells. There might be some fight freak out there, some MMA fiend being like, "Oh, that was an amazing double leg." But for the most part, what people like are knockouts, right? And with Bo Nickal, like with that power and those hands and that speed, dude, there was that shot that he connected on Val, and then Val tried to answer back, bro. He was already out of the way.
Yeah,
like he's looking good, man.
And there was a bit of the cliff too with Val Woodburn.
Yeah,
He kind of
yeah.
caught it. He was like, "Oh, wait a
yeah.
second."
Big time. So dude, yeah, Bo Nickal is on to like big stuff. That dude is a world-class talent in wrestling, and the striking is coming together, and it's quite scary to see. The only thing that I wish is, yeah, give him a step up, right? Naturally, he's finished everybody in the first round. Clearly needs a step up in competition because he's been dealing very easily with what's been put in front of him. But don't rush him. Don't rush him. Dude, he's just 27 or 26, I believe. 27, yeah. Just turned 27 in January. He's got time. He's got time. Just let him cook for a little longer. Because I've been covering MMA long enough, almost a decade, where I have seen guys that promise a lot, not as much as Nickal, but still a lot. They get rushed and they get burnt. And once it's burnt, you can después quitar los raspaditos, you can bring out the knife and kind of, but it's still not going to be the same. So let them cook just a little longer, a little slower. Just let them simmer a little bit.
Give me 30 seconds on Robbie Lawler, the knockout, and what that means in the totality of his legendary career in MMA.
Bro, another huge surprise.
Yeah.
Another huge surprise. In other sports, and this happens a lot in soccer and football, where legends are paid tribute, homage. So what do? They might not be the best in the squad, maybe, but when they're retiring in their last game, okay, they get starting in the team, and then they get subbed out right at the end just so they get a standing ovation by the stadium. And I'm sure in football and in basketball, there are all these other things that they do to pay tribute to these guys that go into a game saying, hey, this is going to be my last, right? In MMA, we get our heart broken all the time. It's usually they get fed to somebody much younger, much better in a squash match, just because whatever star power that legend has, they want to transfer over to the guy that's going to keep on fighting for many years and selling pay-per-views, selling views, etc. Banking on views, social media clicks, whatever the case may be. In this case, Robbie Lawler had a Cinderella story to his career. He went in there, took no damage, knocked this guy out. Then they had a video package ready to honor his career. Then they went in there and interviewed him, allowed him to have a message to the fans, have an entire walkout be filmed. It was a whole ceremony. It was a whole thing, and it was beautiful. Robbie Lawler has given so much to the sport and to the UFC. He's a pillar of the sport. And to have him walk out, how you would say in Spanish, por la puerta grande, through the big door, that was nice to see. It was wholesome. It was really nice to see Robbie Lawler get a tear and leave with a smile, rather than, have Anderson Silva leave knocked out, or however the case may be, name whatever number.
Like Frankie Edgar.
Frankie Edgar flying in New York. It was brutal, man.
I was there in Madison Square Garden. We're like, oh, Frankie Edgar, legend of the sport. His family's there. He's from Jersey. And then Chris Gutierrez hits him with a flying knee. And it was like,
they gave him a stud in Chris Gutierrez. They shouldn't have done that. And this is why I'm sometimes critical with the UFC's matchmaking. Look, if a guy has done so much, I'm not saying do a ceremony for every single guy that's retiring. But if he's a former champion, if he's built this company, like legend. Robbie Lawler, who held the UFC belt at 170 for many fights, and he's a pioneer. Dude, the guy made his debut at UFC 37. We're at UFC 290.
A million years ago.
Yeah, he's 42. Like, he's been fighting for a shit ton of time. Like, give him I'm not saying a squash match, but give him a competitive match that's fairly winnable, that's manageable.
That'll be fun.
Acknowledge his presence and his retirement. Don't just fucking, throw him out there against some young stud that's going to lay him out flat in a minute.
It's like what they wanted to do to Nate Diaz. Feed him to Hamzat. It's like,
feed him to the wolves.
Like, what are we doing here? And luckily that didn't happen, because Hamzat would have killed him. But it's like, man, you want your legends to go out the right way, especially not taking damage, right? Like, that's the most important part that when he knocked him out and they do the video package, Joe asks him, what are you feeling? And he starts crying during the video package that they kind of have him in like a lower third. Dude, I was like, oh, wow. Because people do not get to do that, man. You don't get to do that one last fight, right? It's not like, go ahead.
Yeah, and so people know Robbie Lawler is the most stoic fighter ever.
Yes.
He's literally fell asleep at press conferences. Look it up. There's photos of him literally falling asleep where he's got his head down, kind of like what you do at school, early in the mornings.
Yes.
And literally, all these fighters are being interviewed by tons of media, and he's sleeping. Like, the guy's like the most stoic, emotionless person in the world. and like he was actually shedding tears, and like that was nice to see. Like, yeah, it was dope. It was awesome.
Such a cool card. They slammed. It was a slam dunk. Like they slammed this card through the rim. It was incredible. UFC 290 was one for the ages. Probably card of the year. Has the fight of the year in it. Yeah. Just endless storylines. It's gonna be. This has been a really good year of MMA.
It has.
Like the UFC has put together some monster cards. There's been a lot of commotion between the Izzy thing, between Volk and Islam, between Amanda Nunes retiring. Now we have another thing here with Volk being just, another step in the GOAT ladder for him. Brandon Moreno and Pantoja getting up. Like, such a cool moment. The entire card was, to be honest. And we're in July? The next 5-6 months of cards is going to be bangers too. So I'm super excited. What's the one thing that you're looking forward to in the next couple of weeks and months?
Oh, bro, they announced it on the International Fight Week. John Jones versus Stipe, Madison Square Garden, November. UFC
11th,
290,
yes.
What was that? 5, right? 295, I think.
Yeah.
Bro, that fight is historical. I mean,
yes.
If John Jones beats Stipe Miocic, he's the GOAT. There's no argument. He's the GOAT.
He already is. So imagine that. He already
you can make
is
an argument for GSP though.
You could, but I mean,
you could.
For John to take 3 years out of the fight game, come back, move up a division, and then
GSP did the same thing. He took 4 years, 170, 4 years off, came back at 185, choked out Bisping, and became 185 champion.
You know what it is? It's the thing we talked about. It's you just give more credence to the bigger guys for whatever reason.
Yes,
like
100%.
I just think of John Jones as so far and away better. I think you know what it is? It's that we pin them against other fighters. So it's like, oh, John Jones at GSP, like there's no debate, right? But it's just you have to divide. All right, there's a reason why there's weight classes because you can't have John Jones fight GSP.
And the heavyweight title is special, right? Like if you say I'm the middleweight champion of the world, whereas you say I'm the heavyweight champion of the world, that has a different ring to it. It will always have, So because you're essentially fighting somebody huge, right?
Yes,
because they're heavyweight, right? But you're also a heavyweight. Keep that in mind. But yeah, no, there's definitely going to be. I agree with you. I think there's no getting away from that, and it's unfortunate because we see wars like Pantoja and Moreno, and we're out here telling people like, "Oh, these flyweights are sick," and then you got some doofus at a bar being like, "Well, I got 100 pounds in that fool," So
like, no, that guy would kill you. You don't get
it. Make no. Okay, drink your beer, Bob. Like it's okay. It's okay.
They're gonna put you in a pretzel in 2 seconds outside. If you, I am looking forward to 291. I know they kind of showed the card and stuff.
Yes.
Pereira versus Jan is gonna be a war. And then Dustin versus Justin Gaethje is just. I cannot wait.
Right here.
Those
straight to the veins, puppy. Straight to the veins,
bro. That is gonna be just. I can see a scenario where maybe, again, it's for the BMF title, so not a title fight, but it's going to be a 5-rounder. I could see a world in which that supplants Moreno versus Pantoja for fight of the year.
Oh yeah,
like
100%.
In just like a vacuum, you put those two bangers together, and they're going to just make some history. It's man, I love this sport, and brother, thank you for recapping. We're going to keep doing a lot of stuff with MMA, but this was an incredible card. An incredible fight with Moreno and Pantoja, and I'm just excited for what the future holds for the next 5-6 months of 2023.
Yeah, man. MMA is in a good spot. It's in a good spot right now, and if you were watching this for the first time, or you're just starting to get into MMA, or you've always kind of kept a close eye every now and then, I'm telling you, this is the year. Get into it because there are some good fights in the horizon, as Tony mentioned, and it's best to watch them live rather than on replay. So get on board.
That's the truth. Let the people know where they can find you and all your stuff, brother.
Yeah, for sure. So on social media at Danny Segura TV, that is DANNY Segura TV. Find me on Threads now. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Don't have TikTok. I think I'm a bit too old for that. But we'll see. Maybe in the future I'll get pushed to create one. You'll see me doing some dances or something.
There we go.
Trying to pick fighters. Maybe. Yeah. And for Spanish language content, check out my channel, Hablemos MMA on YouTube. I do interviews with, I had Jair and Brandon before their title fights. And I do a lot of content there in Spanish. And for my English work, check out MMAJunkie.com, the best news site on the damn planet for, I'm sure you got it on tap right there. So,
always, baby.
Oh, yeah. So make sure you go to MMA Junkie. Great work there by my colleagues where, if you want to know everything that's going on in the mixed martial arts world, that's the site to go. So make sure to check that out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Danny Segura from MMA Junkie, brother. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.